Welcome to Module 2 of the course. Now that we've covered the basics of business model canvas, we can move ahead and start looking at more advanced ways in which we can innovate. In this module, what we're going to cover is what are business model patterns and how digital models change how we innovate. And in particular, we're going to focus on business model patterns as a form of innovation. They form a very easy way in which we can start to look across different industries, the business models they've used, and how we can adopt them to create new business models for ourselves. In this module, I'll cover business model patterns and also demonstrate some of the ways digitalization or digital has really changed how we look at business model innovation. First of all, there are two different approaches in the market to business model patterns. The first was developed by BMI Labs, Business Model Innovation Labs, and this was work undertaken by Professor Oliver Gassman, Professor Caroline Frankenberger, and Dr. Michale Zick. You can look at that on their website. They have a website called BMI Labs, and on there you can start to look at the business model patterns that they published in their book, which is the Business Model Navigator. The other way of looking at business model patterns is from the book Strategizer and the Invincible Company. And this was developed by Dr. Alexander Osterwald and Yves Pignol. And these are different approaches to how you can use business model patterns. So we're going to take a look at the different approaches. Both are useful, and I'll show you how to use them. First of all, let's take a look at business model labs. They talk about two different approaches. There is the first in which you transfer a business model to your own industry and adapt it. And this involves taking a model and seeing how that approach, how that pattern could be used in your own business model. Now, the good thing about this is it forms an easy way. It's almost like using a blueprint, and it forces you to ask a number of questions as to whether it fits or whether it doesn't into your business model. Sometimes it doesn't, but what it does do is provide a point of innovation. And often what we're trying to do when we innovate in business models is to challenge our thinking, challenge the way we currently understand how the industry works, how the business model works within either ourselves or competitors, or if we're generating a new one. And what we want to do is rethink how a business could be designed. The challenge is whether we have enough resources to test it. And obviously, as we go through the innovation process, what we're trying to do at every stage of that is to reduce the amount of risk. Now, the other way of doing it is combine more than one pattern. Now, this is particularly useful when you are adapting more than one pattern and looking at it. So it looks for synergies across the different patterns. How well do they fit together? And it forms a more powerful way of maybe innovating. The challenge within that, it increases the level of change and complexity in terms of how you adapt a business model. The really more difficult approach is that you adapt multiple patterns, and this is really where it can be very complex because you're changing significant parts of your current business model. But again, it's not that it's impossible, it's a way of looking at things. So in terms of business model patterns, there was a study done over a number of years by the BMI Labs, and what they started to look at was what patterns in different industries and across different companies helped them be successful. And they started to notice that there were common themes and ways in which they adopted different successful companies used different approaches and patterns within their business models. And what they did is develop a number of cards that people can use. In terms of their approach, what they advocate is that you take 5 to 6 patterns at a time and explore them in terms of your own business model, and asking the right questions along the way. Can we use a revenue sharing model? Can we use a hidden revenue model? What do we do in terms of an add-on? How does that affect different components? And what they do is they explore within this how it changes business models overall. So this is the basic they don't have a canvas, okay? So BMI Labs doesn't use a canvas model, it just uses patterns, but it gets you to focus on this model. So first of all, the question is, what do we offer to the customer? Secondly, how is the value proposition created? And why does this business model generate profit? So using this, we can start to ask the questions based on each of the patterns. Now, the how, if we take a subscription model, we can explore this from the different angles. Customers either pay for the service in advance or in regular intervals. And typically, in a subscription model, they're paying on a monthly basis or repeated annual basis. And we know this from different aspects. So you've got things like the Dollar Shave Club, that is a subscription model for razors and products. Lots of companies have increasingly used subscription models in the marketplace. What? Customers appreciate subscriptions because they don't have to purchase individual products again and again, which saves them time. In other words, if you look at Amazon repeatedly, they now offer a number of products on a regular basis. So if you've got a dry cat food, for instance, instead of just buying a one-off bag, they allow you to set the interval for a subscription, and then they'll deliver it on a regular basis. The price offered, for instance, on Amazon drops if you buy on a subscription basis versus buying it as a one-off product. What does the benefit, or why do you want to do this? Well, one of the main reasons, for instance, is that you get repeated, predictable revenues. That enables companies to scale more easily. So when you're taking this as a business model pattern, you can start to say, okay, how do we actually adopt a subscription pattern? How does it affect the revenue generation? How does it affect the way we create value, the value chain? And how does it affect the value proposition? So what's different about a subscription business model? Well, to deliver it, we have to make sure that we sell and drive value at every stage, that we offer and are able to get renewable and repeatable revenues. And often you find that this is based on an advocacy basis or referrals. Buying, what happens here? It changes the model for the consumers and businesses. So in other words, you need to align partners and create digital services that enable that repeat subscription. So how you collect the money. Not only that, but you've also got to make sure to retain customers and so that they maintain and repeatedly keep on the service, that they have a good experience. So the customer experience is critical throughout this process, because the more subscriptions you get, the more customers that are predictably buying from you, the better and more predictable revenue you get, the more easily you can scale the business. Let's take another one. Razor and blade pattern. So the razor and blade pattern is well known. It's used for a lot of companies. I used to work for Hewlett-Packard, and they had a very powerful razor and blade model. Now let me just explain what that means. Normally what you do is you have a product that you sell to customers, but then there are other products that they buy on a regular basis in order to use that product. So in the case of HP or Hewlett-Packard, they were selling printers. And generally they sold printers, but that wasn't the hardware, or the razor, so to speak, was the printer. But that wasn't where they made their money. They made significant and majority of their profits from the sale of the ink, which was used on a regular basis. And increasingly what they did was enable different size ink cartridges for different models. So they had a range of products, and a range of products that appealed to different customer segments. So printers all the way down from household printers that printed full colour photos, all the way through to small business printers, what's called all-in-ones, which meant that they had scanners as well as printing capabilities. If you take Dollar Shave Club, it sells the razors and it sells the blades, just in simple terms. And again, people like Gillette and Dollar Shave Club build on this model. The difference between the two of Gillette and Dollar Shave Club is that it combined different patterns. The Dollar Shave Club combined the subscription model as well as the razor and blade. So they have two different companies, two different business model patterns that we used and adopted. And by Dollar Shaving Club adopting both, it was able to get a competitive edge over Gillette. And it was actually subsequently bought. On the flip side of things, what we have is the Invisible Company. And what they look at is what's the approach, what's the business model pattern. And they use the business model canvas. So this is probably more familiar to us. And here we have the business model pattern for Spotify. Now Spotify uses a freemium model. And a freemium means that what it offers is a free service to music lovers, but that model is funded by advertisers. So the revenue is offset by the money generated from ads. The premium users pay the premium subscription. So there are two different revenue streams for premium. Premium normally offers and means that you are offering, it's either called a revenue stream from advertising and a revenue stream from the premium paid service. The question becomes how you can use this then for different services. Now, as you'll see from this business model pattern, to implement a freemium model, you have to also think about what are your key resources and activities. And for Spotify, the idea of converting free users over to premium is critical. So one of their key activities is the ability to convert free users over to premium. The second thing that they have to focus on is the fact that not all premium users will stay premium users. So in other words, there's churn. And so their sales and marketing activities are very much geared up to acquiring new users. When I say users, users are both free and premium. The other thing is they have to look at their resources. And one of their resources is actually the size of the customer base. That allows them to do a high level of analytics. It also generates a lot of revenue. The other key resource is the platform itself. The platform enables the premium and free streaming. The platform enables the interaction with the customers, the personalization, the ad revenue to be generated. And so you have this whole model of how a pattern can be used using a freemium model. So this is just one of several patterns that can be explored. Now, when we come to look at patterns, there are different patterns that can be applied in different parts of the business model canvas. We've already focused on the fact that innovation doesn't just happen by creating products. You have to tie the front end with the back end. So in other words, the front stage disruption is where you implement patterns that transform how you interact, acquire customers, communicate with them, and the relationship. Likewise, on the backstage, on how you create value, your activities, your partners, your resources, there are different ways in which you can use patterns to create value. And some of these mean that, for instance, in terms of scalers, that's organizations that really easily engineer their business or design it in such a way that they scale really quickly and easily. And that's not that is not something that is just happens. You have to think about it in terms of how and where you can do that. And of course, the other way in which we can innovate or use business model patterns is in the profit formula. In other words, how we combine the revenue and the cost differentiators to create better margins. And some companies focus on how they differentiate themselves in terms of revenue generation. Others, as we looked earlier on Ryanair, really do think differently about how they operate their costs. So we're going to walk through some of these as examples. Let's just take the first one, the visionaries. They see the market potential where others don't. So good examples of this are really based around this idea of design and changing the market at the front end, how they influence the segments, what new value generation they create to meet those customer segments, and how they capture the revenue. And clearly, when we saw earlier the example of Tesla re-engineered every element of that. Let's start off by looking at Tesla. Tesla created a new market. It was a pioneer in electric cars, particularly in the sports car sector. It captured and expanded its revenue in a different way. It cut out the middlemen and went direct to customers using its website and its stores. In terms of the value proposition, it was quite unique. It appealed to a very eco-friendly sector of the market who still wanted sports cars. You've got then this idea of repurposers. Now, repurposers find innovative ways to tap into a market by using their existing infrastructure. So here, for instance, we talked about earlier Amazon. It had this huge global infrastructure, and it decided that it was using it for its own purposes, but it could be repurposed as for cloud hosting. So in other words, large companies could use their infrastructure to host their website, develop on top of it, and reach a global audience. You've then got people like democratizers. And these basically provide services to what's often called underserved customers, people that maybe couldn't afford or can't achieve a normal product or service. So we're going to walk through some of these in a bit more detail. So as I said, Tesla went direct to customers. It produced an eco-friendly car and it aimed at the high end of the market. Repurposer, Amazon, large global storage company, and M-Pesa. M-Pesa was unique in the way it actually used a mobile phone capability for people to transfer money who were basically didn't have banks. So all of a sudden you had millions of Kenyans with a mobile phone able to receive and make payments. The Tesla business model, if we want to look at it from a business model mapping perspective, this gives you an idea of how that business model pattern works in a great more detail. So Tesla produces different types of cars, and its customer segments are aimed at individuals as well as commercial fleets. It needed to build up an infrastructure that was able to meet the demands in the market of being able to charge the car conveniently up and down different parts of the country. Initially, it was challenged by that, but as it built up its infrastructure, it was able to partner with people to create electric charge points. Something else that it started to focus on was the production itself, how it was able to partner with different companies like Panasonic, who actually had a great deal of expertise in batteries. And through that partnership, they were able to get the critical aspects of the battery produced. So it also then had charge points. So all these things came into play to produce that business model pattern.